Hey, everybody. We're Sykes and Lewis. I'm Matt
Happy
Lewis. He's
Monday.
Charlie Sykes. I'm psyched to see you, Charlie. How you doing, man?
It is great to be with you.
Good to be with you. I'm slowly re-entering,
Hmm.
after 4 or 5 days off. I'm re-entering. So I
Yeah.
don't know if that's going to make me sharper or less sharp, but there is coffee. So we'll see how that
W-
goes.
Well, you're going to be sharp because we have so much to
Mhm.
talk about today. I mean, damn. Okay, so I got
Yeah.
to ask you this question. Is it possible that Pete Hegseth has actually stepped in at this time, that he's in real trouble with this double tap on the boat in the Caribbean? The kill them all. I mean, this doesn't seem to be going away, and I'm not sure that Pete Hegseth is the guy who is going to be able to handle this deftly. What do you
Well, look, it's such an interesting question, right? Because obviously, in a rational world, Hegseth would have already been fired for various,
think?
like number one, he wouldn't
He
have
would
been
never have
appointed
been there.
anyway.
Never.
He
No.
would have been nominated. He wouldn't have been confirmed, but and then there's all the personal stuff, the drinking, all
Yeah.
of those scandals.
Big thing of
This one,
dipsomaniacal chode. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, look, I think it's pretty clear that he has committed a war crime,
Hmm.
unless we are being told, which I do not believe. This seems
Yeah.
very credible to me, but who you never know. But it seems likely he has committed a war crime. Now, Donald Trump, though, doesn't fire people for incompetence or for committing war crimes. In fact, he
He
may
does not.
pardon
Right.
people who have done that. So really there are two reasons that Trump fires people. One, they displeased him, which is maybe they went against something he wants to
Right.
do.
Right. Or
Or two, somebody convinces Trump that that this person has displeased Trump. And so
right.
I'm going to say,
Or is it?
Charlie,
Or he's embarrassed him in some way.
I think that takes someone convincing Trump that Hegseth has embarrassed him. And so that to
Yes.
me
Of
is the
course.
real question. Is everyone has enemies, but is there someone in the administration who is going to go out of their way to try to convince Trump that this is going to splash on Donald Trump?
Well, that's right. Okay. I mean, let's just review a little bit about this. This was the Washington Post story that suggests that Pete Hegseth, who has decided he's become this cartoon character of lethality, said, kill everybody on the boat. And as a result, they fire the missile, they blow the boat up. There are two survivors clinging to the wreckage. They send a second missile to kill them. These are unarmed individuals who pose no threat to anybody whatsoever. Yet a couple of things here. Number one, this is either a war crime or it's cold-blooded murder. It's a war crime if, in fact, the laws of war apply, the rules of war apply. It is cold-blooded murder if they do not. Also, a disturbing part of this is that members of the military have a duty to refuse illegal orders. And somebody, decided they were going to follow Pete Hegseth's order to kill these guys, and they did this. What I think is fascinating is, number one, the story came out. Number two, even Republicans in the Senate and the House are saying that they're going to have investigations. Now, whether there's anything that's going to come of that, we don't know, right? But something's going to happen. This is not just going to go
Hmm.
away. And then you had Donald Trump, who in some ways distanced himself from Pete Hegseth, maybe threw him under the bus. Well, he says he didn't do it. I wouldn't have done it. I don't think it was the right thing to do. I wouldn't have done it.
Right.
Of course, he would have. Um, but he says he didn't do it. So if evidence comes out that he did, Trump has given himself some space. But I just want to make this point before we go any further, because I wrote about this over the weekend in my newsletter. Keep in mind that war crimes are Trumpism in full. Donald Trump has been a war crime enthusiast for years. He has talked about extrajudicial killings. He's talked about extrajudicial murders. He's talked about the summary execution of drug dealers. So if Pete Hegseth did this, which I believe he did it because this is the kind of thing that Donald
Yeah.
Trump has been talking about for years and has been encouraging him and gives him the fist bump for. So this whole idea that somehow that Donald Trump is, well, now he's shocked and he's horrified by this. That is complete bullshit with fur on it. Okay, so
I
let's
totally agree.
start with
Look,
that.
it's the old drug commercial from the 1980s. I learned it from watching you. Um,
Right, right.
Donald Trump, this is part of his MO, and I think I've talked about this before, but I've heard Peggy Noonan say it in years past that if you worked for Ronald Reagan, you knew what he believed in. You know,
Right.
he wanted to, and really it was like, we're going to win the Cold War, we're going to defeat the Soviet Union, and we're going to restore optimism and hope in America. Maybe the details were a little fuzzy. You figure out how
Yeah.
to do it, but you knew the big worldview that he had. And I think with Donald Trump, that's not always the case. Donald Trump doesn't really have a coherent
No,
worldview or philosophy about a lot of things, but he does on this one, Charlie. You're
he is a
exactly
fetish.
right.
He is a fetish.
We know. And so you are essentially carrying out orders. You are advancing a cause that he has espoused as articulately as he's espoused anything. Now, I do have a question for you, though. I heard Joe Scarborough say this morning that when he thinks it's clear that when those 6 Democrats, you know, like famously
Mhm.
Mark Kelly among them, when they put out that video talking about how you do not have to obey an unlawful order, that at the time they did that video, they knew that this Hegseth story was out there and would likely come out. Do you suspect that amount of coordination would be involved in something like this?
I don't know, but in some ways it was completely predictable that something like this was going to happen. I mean, you could certainly make a case, and I've made that case, that the attacks on the boats are themselves war crimes. That in fact they are themselves illegal order. So I don't know. I don't know that, but certainly, boy, you want to talk about drawing a line and putting an exclamation point and then circling it with a red pen. Why it would be a good idea for members of Congress to tell members of the military they have a duty not to obey illegal orders. And by the way, I mean, if you haven't seen it, on I think it was Saturday, I did my newsletter on this. They kill everybody, and in the footnotes, it has a very detailed sort of summary of what the Department of Defense's current, manual of fighting war, what international standards are, and this is not a close call. If you have people who are clinging to the wreckage of a ship, you cannot just summarily execute them. So again,
Yeah.
one of the reasons why this has legs is because you look at the plain language of the rules of war and the rules of engagement, and this is a war crime. Even
Hmm.
Republicans who have been willing to swallow everything else are willing to go after all of this. So, um,
Yeah.
again, the only alternative is that this is, as George Conway says, this is just flat out murder. If the rules of war don't apply,
You know, and
so
I'm no
one or the other.
expert. I'm no
Yeah.
expert on this. I know David French would speak better to this, but my understanding, Charlie, is that this is not merely kowtowing to the Geneva Convention or the Hague or something like that. That American law, like especially this 1996 War Crimes Act, has codified this as well
Yes.
in U.S. law, and so that this is a violation. Now, of course, Donald Trump is going to pardon, very likely,
Right.
Pete Hegseth at some point,
And
a
everybody else
pre
in the
a,
chain of
a
command.
pre
Yeah.
pardon. Yeah, I
Well,
think
right.
that we should whoever survives the next 3.5 years or 3 years or whatever, in a couple months, um, should clearly go after anybody involved in this, wherever they are on the totem pole, because I think we need to incentivize people behaving properly and not following unlawful orders.
Well, that's right, and again, I would urge people to actually look at the language of these rules and these laws because they're not ambiguous whatsoever. And of course, we're going to get to the incredible sort of hypocrisy of at the same time using the war on drugs as an excuse to wage this war and perhaps go to war with Venezuela at the very same time that Donald Trump is pardoning one of the most notorious cocaine drug pens of Central
Yep.
America here. I do have one fear, which I want to put out as a contrarian here, which is, keep in mind that Donald Trump has been, talking about war crimes for years. He has pardoned some of the worst offenders, in Trump 1.0. It's certainly possible there is that pattern of Trumpist defenders. He didn't do it; it didn't happen. Well, maybe it did
Hmm.
happen. He did it, and you just can't handle the truth, right? I mean, it goes that way.
It's very a few good men. Absolutely, you're damn
Very
right. I
much
ordered the code red. He
right,
wants to say it. He
right,
wants to
right.
say it.
So what happens is that the unacceptable, you start with the denial and then you go with the well, maybe, and then full embrace. And my concern is that at some point we've seen these extremist ideas mainstreamed over and over and over again. What if Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth said, "Yeah, we're just going to kill as many narco terrorists as we can, however we can. We don't give a shit."
Yeah,
Basically, then tell the American people that yes, we commit war crimes and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, look, this is a man, keep in mind, who's been found liable for sexual abuse, sexual assault, who tried to overthrow an election. He's a convicted felon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the Republican Party has accepted one thing after another. And so
yeah.
my fear here is that there will be widespread support. Pete Hegseth is betting on that. He's putting out internet memes of cartoon characters killing
Hmm.
narco terrorists. So one possible future is that Donald Trump breaks down one more norm, crosses one more red line,
Yeah,
moves the Overton window over here and says, "Yeah, killing people
totally.
who are,
I think this is going to happen. I think you're totally onto something here. And it's, when I first heard the Kill 'Em All or whatever the
yeah,
verbiage was, my first thought was, I think that's a Metallica album. My second thought was, as a boy going to a lot of Army surplus stores, and, my uncle was a gunny sergeant in the Marines in Camp Lejeune, and I would go down there,
hmm,
spend time with him. He would get his men up. This may sound cruel, but it was part of their
hmm,
training. He
yeah,
would get them up in the middle of the night and make them move. And then the next day we would come in and I would get cool little souvenirs that were left behind. I don't know if that's wrong, but as a 12-year-old boy or 10-year-old
yeah,
kid, but I would go to these Army surplus stores and like, we were still fighting the Vietnam War back then in my
yeah,
in my head. I think every kid has a different enemy. My friend Manny from Armenia was always fighting the Turks. For us, it was the Vietnamese. We were like, Chuck Norris and John Rambo. But I remember you would go to these stores and there'd be like a lot of, I think there was like one of them had like a big rocket out front that said "To Russia with Love." But there
yeah,
was this slogan that you would see on T-shirts, and it said "Kill them all,
yeah,
let God sort them out."
sort of
So
out. I
I
remember
do
those.
think there's this mentality, and it goes to the whole we're Dirty Harry. We don't play by the liberals who have these technicalities, but Dirty Harry Callahan, you know,
Yes, the Dirty
he
Harry thing.
actually gets things done. And if that means breaking a few stupid rules, then so be it. And look, if you're going to pick an enemy, narco terrorists are a pretty good enemy to pick, whether or not these people actually are narco terrorists. So look, this is all a long way of saying, like, I think you're totally onto something. And
Yeah.
I don't know if Trump is going to go along with it, but clearly Hegseth wants this to be the new normal.
Well, you can imagine that what Hegseth will do is he'll come into those congressional hearings and he'll do again, you can't handle the truth speech here. Remember when Oliver North was caught up in Iran Contra? His performance was strong enough to make him kind of a hero on the right, even though
I
obviously
had
he had
I
been
had two, not one, but two T-shirts, two Oliver North
yeah.
T-shirts that I bought on the boardwalk at Ocean City, Maryland.
Well, we know the
And
pattern that
yeah,
yeah. So Donald Trump wants these guys to go in there and put on these fiery performances and yell and scream and everything, and people will go, yeah, because that's the way our tribal thing is. And at the end of the day, this one, I think, norm of civilization that we don't fight each other, we don't kill the wounded, we don't kill murder
yeah,
prisoners and everything, will be eroded because that's the pattern. That's the
yeah.
pattern that we've experienced.
And let me make a point too. Like, not only should we do this because it's moral and the
Yeah,
right thing to do, but these rules also allow us to take the moral high ground. And so, for example, we were fighting against the Soviets. They were the evil empire. They were oppressors. They were imperialists. And I think Reagan correctly positioned us as the virtuous side. When we talk about
right.
we're not, we're liberated. We're not here to liberate. We're not here. We are.
We're the
I'm
shining
sorry.
city on a
We are
hill.
we are
Yeah.
we are liberators. We're not oppressors. We're not here to be imperialistic. And so there's like actually a strategic reason for that. And look, when we start, there's no reason for anyone to commit violence against Americans. We can just say that
Yeah.
full stop. But when you have people say, like, I don't know, Afghan interpreters or Afghan nationalists who turn against America. Like, again, it's not right, and we do not condone it. We condemn it. But how much, like, there's going to be some, collateral damage and some response if America is seen as, you know, murdering people, then there may be some blowback from that at
Okay,
some
well,
point.
see that's also there's a practical reason why you don't torture prisoners and murder prisoners at work because you don't want the other side to do the same thing to you. So
Yep.
yeah, all of those things apply. I mean, look, the world is watching us. The world is watching, what is America? Who are Americans? What are they going to do? How are they going to behave? This whole idea that the law does not apply to us, that we're back to the law of the jungle is ugly. So can we talk about the strangest twist on all of this? The pardon of the former president of Honduras? Because
Yeah,
I
please.
gotta say that just in terms of being off message, it's kind of mind blowing, unless I'm missing something, which I hope then you can explain to me. At the very time when we're about to take America to war against the president of Venezuela because he is allegedly a drug kingpin and many other things as well, Donald Trump pardons one of the worst cocaine kingpins in the world, a guy who had taken $1 million bribe from El Chapo, to transfer cocaine through Honduras. Somebody was killed in prison in order to protect the guy. A jury unanimously found him guilty of all this. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison. And Donald Trump has chosen this particular moment to say, "Yeah, he's a drug fin, but he's my buddy." So
Hmm.
what do you make of this?
Yes, Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former president of Honduras,
Bad guy.
convicted in the U.S. on drug trafficking and weapons
Yeah.
charges. And, who knows? Obviously, Donald Trump, this is consistent with, like, the people for me are good, the people that are nice to me or sucking up to me are good, and then the other people are bad. And so he's meaner toward Mark Kelly than he is toward this convicted drug pen, right? I mean, it's one,
But a
you
court
know,
martial.
and possibly hang Mark Kelly, but we're going to exonerate or at least pardon.
Yeah, but there are
Um,
elections in Honduras right now. So I mean, he's trying to influence the elections in
he's doing
Honduras,
that
which
too.
is which
Well,
is also not so.
one obvious point is
Mhm.
he just doesn't think that any leader should be held accountable for what happened when they were a leader. If you're president, you do whatever you want, and no one can then retroactively come back, or no one should be able to punish you, right? So the same thing with Bolsonaro. You know, they get to do whatever they want when they're in power, and it's wrong to then retroactively go after them.
Well, and I mean, the fact is, this whole idea that leaders should be able to kill who they want is kind of, it's a matter of public record. He was asked about, well, Vladimir Putin kills people, and he goes, well, we kill a lot of people. Remember that?
He did it
Then
twice.
what was it
Once with
like?
Bill O'Reilly and once with Joe Scarborough.
So
He
like
said it twice. Yeah.
15 minutes ago, he's sitting in the Oval Office with MBS.
Yeah.
I mean, MSP, basically saying, yeah, that whole, killing this American reporter, cutting him with the bone
Things happen.
saw, things happen.
Yeah.
So we laugh, but it is tragic. These are human lives, and I think this is gonna look. Pete Hegseth is in trouble, but I don't think that people ought to sleep on the fact that we have seen these values abandoned in a breathtaking fashion before. And you would think that the U.S. military's commitment to not commit atrocities. And by the way, if you go through, I was actually paging through the Department of Defense handbook. I mean, the detail with which they describe the obligations of troops, basically saying, just simply saying I had orders is not a sufficient defense. If the Nuremberg defense does not apply to the U.S. military. So this is deeply, deeply ingrained. But I don't think that we should take it for granted that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and MAGA will, in the end, undermine that taboo against war crimes. I mean, again, if you go back and you look what Donald Trump has said about war crimes in the past, this is it's more likely than not that he's going to try to do it. I think his comments yesterday are more of an outlier. The real Donald Trump is, yeah, you know, we have just begun to kill narco terrorists.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think one of the big accomplishments of Donald Trump is because a lot of most of the things he's doing are not going to endure legislatively. 'Cause he's not doing much legislatively, right? So he's doing executive orders and all that. But I think among his most enduring accomplishments, and I put scare quotes around that, is just the way that he has changed our norms on a whole bunch of different things. And I think that you can add this to the list.
Yes, yes,
Um, Now, again, it wouldn't be the first time. I think that, like in the 1970s, certainly, with the movies like Death Wish and Dirty Harry, I think were, you know, suggested that the American public tended to believe that the kind of liberal elites were
right.
following the letter of the law, and that crime was so. In the issue of what crime specifically, I think. But this is a different thing, and I think Donald. I think it is. I mean, I guess Trump he acts viscerally, so I don't know to what degree this is planned, but it's definitely happening in the works. Here's the one good note, though, Charlie. His popularity is waning,
Oh my God.
and
Yeah.
if we have a silver lining, it is that he's down to what is it, 38%, something like that, in this latest Reuters poll.
Gallup has him
And
down
a
there.
36%. It was 38 the other week. 36%. And I mean, you look at the list, it's not just his overall approval rating. Every issue he is underwater on. Even the issues that he like crime is an issue that traditionally Donald Trump does well with. Not doing well there either. So
Well, and
if there's a
interesting, and
silver
just
lining.
well, and there are. I mean, again, we caution always against irrational exuberance, or we're buying into this. Walls are closing in around Donald Trump, but there are cracks in MAGA. You are seeing more of a willingness to push back against him. He's not a lame duck yet, but there's lame duckism. Again, I want to caution that doesn't mean that he's less dangerous. It may mean that he's even more dangerous. But yeah, 36%, 38%. And it's not just on every single issue, it's also in one demographic group after another. I mean, the numbers of what's happening with American Latinos, with young people, with independents. I mean, this is an historic freefall by somebody who has had a reliable floor. Now, MAGA is going to stick with him, the Republican Party is going to stick with him. But I think that there's a sense that he's pushed the American people past that red line of decency. Like, okay, we want to enforce the law. We believe in law and order. We want secure borders. This is not what we signed up for. I'm
Mhm.
hoping that is the silver lining.
Well, we knew who Donald Trump was all along, and it's
Yes, we did.
premised on the notion that character is destiny.
Yes.
But in fairness to those voters, um, up until COVID, for some reason he doesn't get blamed for. They believe that Biden was president
Oh,
during
so
COVID.
weird. Yeah.
But in their minds, up until COVID, um, Donald Trump didn't start any wars, and he had a good economy. And so, even though we would certainly quibble with that assessment, but based on that premise, he's not doing the same thing this time. He is starting wars, or extrajudicial killing, murders, either one or the other, with what's going on in Venezuela. And the economy stinks, and affordability is a problem.
Portability.
So, yeah.
And he's tone deaf, and he's tone deaf on this. You know, the irony is that he could have simply declared victory on the immigration issue. I mean, the reality is that there was a widespread perception that Joe Biden had not handled the border well, that we did have uncontrolled immigration. This is not necessarily true, but the polls would suggest that public opinion switched, harshly against immigration and against Biden on that issue. The border has calmed down quite a bit. So Donald Trump could have basically almost taken the victory lap. Instead, he's sitting there with that weird homunculus, Stephen Miller. By the way, have you seen his wife, Katie, on TV lately? Oh my God. Anyway, Stephen Miller convinces him, let's muscle up. Let's, thug up ICE to this, unprecedented level, and let's go after them everywhere. And so rather than basically saying, okay, I've handled that, let me work on something else, they are making this the face of American cruelty. And that's not going to change. I don't sense that he will ever pivot on that.
Well, it's partly because Stephen Miller really is an ideologue and really
Yes.
believes in the immigration stuff. It's not just about, he doesn't, his goal is not, I mean, to his credit, he's a true believer. It's not about making Trump more popular.
Yeah.
It's
No,
about actually, he really wants to accomplish things. It's sort of like,
he
remember
does.
Nancy Pelosi was willing to sacrifice the House and a lot of House members in order to pass
Yeah.
health care because she
Right.
really
Right.
believed in it. Stephen Miller is willing to sacrifice Donald Trump's political popularity because he really believes in being mean to immigrants. And so I
He
have a
really
little,
is a fascist. I mean, he
he,
is a
he really
fascist.
is. Yeah,
He is.
he is.
Yeah.
Um,
So
Speaking of which, I'm listening to The Rest is History, and it's Hitler Week on The Rest is
yeah.
History. And, you're just reminded how, like, again, these comparisons are dangerous and they're not perfectly analogous, of course. But Hitler did crazy things early on that worked. And, these so called experts would come in and advise him and, like, sir, you can't invade this way. We have to go.
Yeah.
And he would defy those experts, basically calling them pussies.
Hmm.
And then his thing would work. No one thought he would do it. It just miraculously, magically, this plan that was stupid, crazy, overly ambitious worked. And then eventually he wouldn't listen to anybody except for people who were more crazy than him. And we ultimately it caught up to him, right? Here's a better example that is less controversial, but I do think about it. Tom Brady. Like, Tom Brady won all these Super Bowls,
Yeah.
but at the end, he could have retired. He won a Super Bowl. He could have retired a Super Bowl champion, kept his wife, his beautiful wife, and kids, and had a family. But he couldn't.
Dead.
He had to play that one more season. Now, why? Well, because someone like me, who was rational enough to say, hey, Tom, you just won the Super Bowl. You've got a gorgeous wife. Let's call, you don't want to risk getting
Oh,
injured. You're probably not, let's just hang it up. You're not going to have Gronk this season, whatever. Hang it up. But, like, the guy like me who says that would never have won the Super Bowl. Put aside the fact that I don't have the talent to do it.
yeah.
But
It's one of the factors.
you have to be crazy to do what Tom Brady did, to keep going out there, to keep putting yourself, like, to practice so much. The guy was drinking like arugula, or eating arugula ice cream. I mean, like, he was like in a hyperbolic chamber or something to increase his oxygen flow. I don't even know. But, like, my point is, you have to be kind of crazy to be as good as Tom Brady was, which also blinds you to, like, logic and listening to wisdom that says, "Hey, man, it's time to hang it up." Donald
Hubris is
Trump,
a terrible drug. I mean,
the Greeks
hubris will
figured this
destroy.
one out a long time
A
ago, didn't they?
long time ago. Yes, they did.
That's
I
my
mean,
point. Trump has made it this far by not listening to wise,
I think that's what's
rational
happening
people.
right now. No, I do think that you get that sense that, I'm right about everything. Everybody around me says I'm right about everything. I've gotten away with stuff people said I would never get away with. Therefore, I'm not going to listen to anybody that says don't do this. And so at a certain point, success morphs into this overweening pride, this hubris, this refusal to listen to smart people. And this is the weakness of all authoritarians. I mean, not just going back to Germany, all authoritarians, they surround themselves with yes people who tend to be mediocrities, and they stop listening to them. Now, again, Stephen Miller is driving this particular bus, but, you know, as Republicans are looking at the midterms, they're looking at this weird collection of misfit toys that is running the Trump administration, and they're thinking, our fate is tied to these guys. What could possibly go wrong? Because it does feel, I mean, the last week was not a great week for them. Pam Bondi, has her head handed to her on the Comey and Letitia James prosecutions. Kristi Noem goes on Meet the Press and basically acknowledges that they're defying federal court orders, that she's the one. Yes, it was me. She's got her own, yeah, of course it was me and you can't handle the truth moment, that she was the one who told the planes to keep flying to El Salvador after the federal judge said this. So
Hmm.
one by one, each of these cabinet members is either flopping, failing, or putting themselves in grave legal peril. And you kind of wonder how that plays out. And we don't know.
I do have a sense. You never know; things could change. But it just seems to me like Trump has seen number one, second terms usually don't go
Hmm.
that well after the
They
midterms,
don't. No.
and so it just everything suggests to me that things are not getting better for Trump. I don't think the economy is going to get better, like based on what he's doing, his policies. He's getting old. He is not looking healthy. Um, he has surrounded himself with either crazed ideologues or incompetent mediocrities. I don't see things getting better, which is to say, for Democrats, it seems like things are looking good electorally. Now, I don't know if you saw this, and this is wildly premature, but what the hell? I think it was Axios today said that effectively it's sort of like the Revolutionary War, where you had like a third of the people were loyalists, a
Hmm.
third of the people were
Yeah.
patriots, and a third of the people just didn't care or didn't
Hmm.
know. It's like right now, it's like a third of the country is pro-Trump, a third of the country is anti-Trump, and a third of the country tends to swing back and forth anti-incumbent based on, who won the last election. And so it is a little bit dangerous to think like, okay, I don't think Democrats should assume that
Yeah.
because Trump is floundering now, and even if Democrats have a great midterm, I don't think it's safe to assume, oh, the American public has seen the light. They're on our side now. They've
Mhm.
rejected Trumpism. Like a third of those people are going to be pro Trump no matter what. And then there's this third that just, if Democrats get back in power, particularly if they win the presidency in 2028, if they don't actually fix things and change things, I mean, we are now in a situation, Charlie, where the Republican Party is so dangerous and so bad, they can never win. You and this we live in a world where seats go back and it oscillates
Yeah.
every few years and there's all these wave elections.
Yeah.
If your hope is Democrats win and just keep winning,
Mm.
fair and square, manage to just keep winning, and the Republicans can never win again until somehow they've gotten this out of their system and become,
Yeah.
a decent party again. Like, when's that going to happen?
Yeah, who knows whether that's going to happen anytime soon. It's hard to envision it at the moment. Uh, you know, political parties have to lose big in order to, have their come to Jesus moments, and that hasn't happened so far. But you're mentioning this, trying to imagine what happens if you have a change in government, and that's the thing that really continues to puzzle me. That the Republicans and the Trumpists and many of the business people and the other institutions that are caving into them seem to be operating under the assumption that Trump will always be in power. It will be the Trump Department of Justice, that there will never be any accountability, that there will never be any reverse retribution. I thought it was very interesting, and I missed this story, and I felt bad about it yesterday when I saw it. Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan earlier this month announced that they were not going to be contributing to did you see this? They would not be
Mm-mm.
contributing any money to the Trump ballroom. And he says, because we have issues. We don't want to make it appear that we are trying to buy influence because there will come a time when there might be a Democratic run Department of Justice that will ask us about this. And we have all kinds of business with governments. We need to be very, very careful about the appearance of trying to bribe the president through this because there might be accountability. Now, I actually thought that was interesting because now you suddenly now have these CEOs going, we all have been telling ourselves that the safe, prudent move was to give Trump whatever he wanted. Maybe that's not the safe, prudent move.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we do need to understand the wheel of fortune goes around, and then what goes around, goes around comes
Yeah.
around. And the fact that somebody like Jamie Dimon is saying, guys, you're going to get away with everything right now. But you need to ask
Mm-hmm.
yourself, how is this going to look in some future where, in fact, you don't have, Pam Bondi, as Attorney General? I thought that was interesting, and
It
maybe
is.
that psychology is going to change.
But my question is, would Jamie Dimon have made that comment and the same calculation if the 2025 elections hadn't come out the way they did. If
That's
Donald
an
Trump's
excellent question.
polling had, so I think that this is almost like a self fulfilling prophecy that if people believe, if you believe that Trump is kind of omnipotent and going to be ever
Yeah,
present, then you
forever.
will therefore give him the power that will make him omnipotent uh, and ever present. And but if there's a sense, it's also it's like it's contagious. If there's a sense that Trumpism is fading, then the bottom drops out. And so I think that there's a psychology here that is incredibly important and incredibly powerful.
I agree with
And
you.
if you care about keeping Donald Trump from attempting to stay in office for
Yeah,
a third term, it is important that he has dealt these blows, I think, in terms of sort of like public opinion and elections, because that's going to signal to people who might otherwise actually enable him to get away with it down the road.
I totally agree with you. I think that's exactly the dynamic that's going to
Judges,
play
even
out.
judges too. I mean, there are going
They
to be.
watch.
I mean, if you're a judge, and I would really hope that they're that it's blind justice, but they're
Yeah, they read
human.
the papers. Yeah.
If you're a judge and you think Donald Trump is going down, this isn't going anywhere, you might be more inclined to rule against him than if you think, well, this guy's going to, I see which
Either
way the wind is blowing. He's
just
never
hedge your
leaving.
bets.
Yeah. Yep.
Hedge your bets. So since we're talking about the various FUBARs that have taken place here, we have to comment on the whole Ukraine sellout and what we learned over the weekend about Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Had they been sitting down in Miami negotiating with the head of the Russian sovereign fund, and basically figure out how can we carve up these assets. And it really is one of those moments where you go, so at the root of this peace plan was this plan to betray, sell out Ukraine, and then all of our buddies, our privileged business partners, profit from all of this. And once again, these guys are telling us who they are and what's really important to them. So your thoughts on that? Because I think it's Ukraine game, but it's going to end up like all the others. Russia, floated this idea. It's obviously not going anywhere. Russia's not going to accept anything else. Your take.
I think this is Donald Trump has incentivized this type of behavior. He has signaled very clearly that if you want to cut a deal with him or win him over, that the way to do it is to make it. It's not about values. It's not about morals. It's not about moral clarity. It's about money. Money for America and money for him and his cronies. And so the, Donald Trump has invited this kind of overture, this kind of indecent proposal. And so Russia's being smart, right?
Well, they know how to play Donald Trump.
Yeah, you're not going to win him over by, singing "Onward, Christian Soldiers" on the deck of a boat and talking about, Western defending Christendom and Western civilization. Sorry, I've been watching a Churchill documentary as well. I'm very ensconced in World War II right now. Over the holidays. But no, you're not going to win him over by
Good.
making like a moral case. You're going to do it much more. It's much more materialistic than that.
Okay, so you're ensconced in that. I've actually been reading a lot about the American Revolution. Joseph Ellis has a new book out called The Great Contradiction. I would strongly recommend it. Also, the Ken Burns series, The American Revolution. I have to admit that part of it is so depressing when you realize the caliber of the minds and the character of the people who were involved in our founding. Obviously, they were flawed men. They made some significant mistakes, but to realize that we have gone from them to this right now is it's it's tough. It's tough to read. It's tough to watch.
And I don't know if you saw that big Netflix biopic on Garfield.
I want to.
Who I didn't know that much about Garfield, but watching that also, you're like, I mean, so, seemed to be utterly decent guy who really was just a reformer who wanted to
Yeah.
get rid of the spoil system and the machine
Yeah.
politics and the opposite of what we have now. You know what's crazy? You probably know this, Charlie. I had forgotten this, but I saw it recently that I think it was Robert Lincoln, one of Abe Lincoln's children, who was witness to three different presidential assassinations,
Right.
including Garfield, and he himself, Lincoln's son, had been saved by Booth's brother. So it was just an
Seriously.
amazing twist of it. I love this stuff. It's
Yeah, I do
and
too.
and it's good to get away from current times, but we can't help but be reminded as we're watching some of this stuff. Again, comparing some of these great leaders with what we have today, it's not a favorable comparison for us.
No, it's not. And by the way, if you're interested in Garfield, the book Dark Horse is really outstanding. It's one of the best political biographies I've ever read. Called Dark Horse. It's about how he got elected, sort of against all odds before he was assassinated.
Yeah, and I would, look, it was a little weird watching the biopic there on Netflix because Chester Arthur is played by Ron Swanson.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard. Every once in a while, you get into it, and then you're like, oh, there's the guy from Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
Um, but ultimately, I would give it a thumbs up, and I would recommend if you like history, I would recommend watching it. So
Yeah, and I would recommend this new Joseph Ellis book about the great contradiction. The American Revolution and slavery and Indian removal. And the one thing that Ellis really does a good job is he doesn't engage in presentism, which is basically applying all of our values and all of our perspective, to the founders. On the other hand, this is not a rationalization of what happened. In fact, it's still kind of shocking to realize some of the flaws in something that we have revered. And again, this is why we study history. This is why the erasure of history that is less than rah rah is such a complete mistake, because American history is incredibly, I think, inspiring, but it's also incredibly complex, and it raises some real challenges about all of this. And I think that there had been a tendency to completely whitewash it. Are there people who've come up with revisionist histories that are unfair? Yes. But what's happening right now, where the Trump administration and MAGA is going around, banning books and eliminating Black history, it's a real it feels un-American because it means that we're not going to have a reckoning with the issues that we confronted in the past and still confront today.
absolutely, and with history, I think we usually underrate technology as being a driving force of history, and we've talked. People have noticed, like the automobile, for example, probably did more to change mores and values
I think
than
so.
any philosopher.
Yeah,
The ultrasound probably did more to advance the pro-life cause than
I
like
think so.
any pro-life activist or speaker.
I
And
think so.
I just think that social media and more specifically the iPhone, I mean, truly, I am struggling now um, with the fact that mainstream media is pretty much pointless at this point, and it's really Candace Owens has more viewers than the nightly news probably, and I am someone who started off as a blogger in this business. I mean, I was new media, I wasn't
Hmm.
old media, and even I uh, am struggling to try to stay current. It is dramatically changing things, and I do worry that like our understanding of things like civics and our appreciation for history is it's in grave danger because of this shift to social media, podcasts, things like that.
Well, I think so too, but also it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to introduce it to a new generation in different ways. The fact that we've been talking about, the Ken Burns thing, the Netflix series, these are all presenting it. And I think one of the opportunities is that I think we've become very, very complacent. I think we've become kind of, fat and lazy when it comes to what American values are, what it means to be an American, what the American idea was, due process, all of those things. And so we're having to relearn it. We're like being reintroduced to it like it's a foreign country and going, hey, that's actually very, very interesting. I had not heard those stories before. Whereas when I grew up, every story you'd heard 1,000 times. It's it is, I think, a chance to reintroduce Americans to America. But again, that may be irrational exuberance on my part,
Well,
since
but I don't want to be too
Americans are so distracted.
pessimistic.
Yeah, no, I don't want to be. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, say circa 2014, sitting side having lunch with my friend Jamie Weinstein, and he had
Mm.
seen this new musical Hamilton, and he was obsessed with it. And then I remember during that time thinking, like, wow, here we have these like African Americans who are popularizing the founding fathers in a way that is like cool and modern, but yet also reverent. And it's going to be introducing a whole different, young people, uh, people who might otherwise not be, frankly, predisposed to care about these founders. And like, I'm like, wow, what a great development. And then things are going awesome. And then Donald Trump comes down the escalator. Um, and so, but I think just as things can quickly turn bad, they can also quickly turn good. So I don't want to be overly optimistic and have irrational exuberance, but I also don't want to be pessimistic and cynical either.
Well, I mean, and part of it is that we get to see these things. I mean, let's go back to where we started with this. The war crime in the Caribbean. We are seeing pictures of that. I mean, look, have war crimes been committed in every single war, in every single conflict, in every single decade? Yes, they have. But one of the things that changed during the Vietnam War was that people began to see it on television. If people would have seen what was happening on World War II on television, I think public opinion might have been different. So all of these, going to your point, the technology changes the way that we interact with history and with current events. And so we now all know about what's going on. These extrajudicial murders are not taking place in a cellar somewhere. Think about most of the monsters of history. Joseph Stalin did not have, a home shopping channel videos about the Gulag Archipelago. I mean, they didn't announce it. I mean, they would have show trials and everything, but a lot of the things that happened were not, front and center. Right now, we're in an era in which that is being exposed. The downside, of course, are these alternative reality silos where we'll have these conversations about like, well, how will the public react to this latest thing? And the reality check is, well, half the public doesn't know about it. They will never see it. They don't know that Donald Trump calls women piggies. They don't know any of this stuff that he fell asleep in the Oval Office because it just doesn't penetrate. So, but this is the world that we live in right now. And we're going to have to figure out a way to navigate it because it is moving fast. And while many of the laws of human nature, have not been repealed, I also think we need to understand that the rules of engagement in terms of politics, engagement, media is changing all the time, and maybe faster than even the people who, are making the big bucks fully understand.
Indeed. Well, I'm in a now suddenly like in this philosophical mood, and I
Yeah.
could uh, but I don't want to go on another rabbit trail. So,
Okay. Fine.
any final thoughts or topics, maybe more tied to the news cycle, before we
Okay.
ride off
Well,
into the sunset, Charlie?
let's talk about the tragic shooting of the National Guardsman in Washington, D.C., and the way that it turns out that it was a naturalized Afghan. And, of course, this is a terrible tragedy. No one is to blame for this other than the shooter. I think we need to make that clear. On the other hand, look, this is the thing: you deploy troops, you put them in harm's way by definition. You put armed troops in city streets, you put them in harm's way. I think we need to remember that. Um, but I also think that we gloss over too quickly the fact that Donald Trump immediately issued the sense of collective guilt, that it's not just this one shooter, it's all Afghans. We have to shut down all asylum. We're looking at people who had, and again, let's remember who many of these Afghan refugees were. These were people who trusted us, who worked with us, who defended with us, who fought side by side with us. We had a moral obligation to bring them here. And now suddenly in Donald Trump's mind, and this is textbook racism, applying this collective national racial guilt to an entire group because of one bad actor. And there was a time, I feel like, a few years ago, when we would have understood that that was textbook racism. And now it feels like, yeah, well, that's just Donald Trump. Public doesn't care about this. We've had elections, but I think that what happened with those two National Guardsmen is appalling and a national tragedy. What's happening to the Afghan community, the innocent Afghan community, I think is a potential, again, humanitarian, international, national security disaster in the waking,
Yeah.
in the making. Because who's ever going to trust us again? Let's say we throw out the interpreters. Let's say we put them back on planes. We send them back to the Taliban. What allies anywhere in the world will ever trust Americans again if we do that kind of shit?
And this is now a pattern with the Kurds, and you can get
Yep.
on the list. Um, so, U.S. Army, like a specialist, Sarah Beckstrom, 20, and she has died. U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, 24, I believe still remains hospitalized. Both West Virginia. I'm sitting in West Virginia now. These are both from West Virginia. And Charlie, I didn't bring this up when it happened because I don't think it was appropriate to, but I'll say it at this point. Why were they in Washington, D.C.?
Yes, West
I don't think
Virginia
they should
National
have
Guard.
been.
No,
I don't think that these, and we honor them in their service and certainly condemn what happened, to them. But I don't think they should have been in Washington, D.C. If anything, they should have been like in Martinsburg, West Virginia or something. There are things happening in West Virginia. I don't think they should have been in Washington, D.C. And
I agree.
I'm assuming someone else has made this point by now. I actually haven't heard anyone else say that, but I just did. But look, I think that there is a long running theme now amongst MAGA and America First, which basically says that even if 99.9% of immigrants or refugees are model citizens, and even if they have much lower rates of criminal activity than
Which they do.
regular standard issue American citizens, it doesn't matter. Because if one does something wrong, they shouldn't have been here in the first place. And if you are the victim, I think it's understandable that you would feel that way. That if you're the victim, you're an American citizen, you're a victim of a crime committed, say, certainly
Yeah.
by an illegal immigrant, it's perfectly rational that you should say that. I think the question is,
Okay,
should we
perfectly
conduct
rational.
should we conduct our public policy when we're focused on 350 million
Well,
Americans,
of
and
course
if we
not.
have,
No.
yeah,
And it's no, it's not perfectly rational. It's perfectly understandable emotionally. The
right, right,
rational thing is to understand that we are individual actors, that you and I have agency over what we do, but then so do people of color, so do Afghans, so do Somalians, so do Mexicans. That if one Mexican is a rapist does not mean that Mexicans are rapists, and that we need to make public policy based on it. This is the essence of racism, is attributing the sins of one individual to an entire racial group, which obviously, not like white people, you have good people, and you have bad people, you have law abiding people, well, that's the case of every single group. But Donald Trump has eroded that understanding. And I think this is one of and I read about this in my newsletter today. This is one of the canaries in the coal mine that have died. That it used to be that when you had someone who said something like, let's ban all Muslims, that wasn't that long ago. You got, all of these Republican voices would rise up and say, whoa, whoa, that's not an American idea. We do not have group guilt like that in that particular way. And now so you look at that incredible rant from Thanksgiving. How many elected Republicans push back against it in any way whatsoever? So that's another one of those canaries in the coal mine that's already dead.
yeah.
Lot of canaries all around
And
us.
it's been normalized. I mean, Trump said that in 2015. They're not sending their best. He started with this kind of
Exactly.
line of argumentation. Up until then, it had been really the product of like VDare and you know Richard
Yeah,
Spencer. But
very much.
Trump has normalized it, and now we have. I don't know if you
That's right.
saw this, and I don't want to misquote him or mischaracterize it. I don't have it in front of me, but Nikki Haley's son is now kind of making comments that are very in line with kind of the nationalist America First worldview. Did you see this, Charlie?
I think I saw the headline and then I realized I don't care about what Nikki Haley thinks, and I certainly don't care what her son thinks anymore. So
Well,
it's
I don't want to
triage.
like, I don't want to mischaracterize. I'm not going to go into any details, but I do think that Trump's worldview has been
Yes,
normalized, and certainly among a lot of young people who don't remember the before times. Like this is all they've known. If you're a
that's right.
Republican, this is all you've known.
This is the problem. And one of the things I did in my newsletter was I compared the reaction 10 years ago. 10 years ago this month, Donald Trump called for the complete shutdown of Muslims in the United States, and one Republican after another, not just Paul Ryan, but Mitch McConnell, Reince Priebus, Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio, all said, no, this is a terrible thing. Fast forward 10 years, Donald Trump essentially says the same kinds of things, and it's like crickets, like mixing my metaphor of canaries and crickets. Canaries are dead, the crickets are completely silent.
All right, and I think some of it, is a combination of reasons why that happened. But he has moved the Overton window. There is no doubt about it, and
No
like
doubt.
it's really put aside the negative externalities. It's pretty amazing how he has changed who we are and what we believe and what is within the bounds of mainstream political thought that used to be consigned to the fringes and the extreme.
It's exactly right. It is amazing. It is shocking. It is appalling. It is soul crushing. But again, for people who feel that the world has been turned upside down, it's not you. The world has been turned upside down by these folks.
Indeed. All right. Well, so let me just say, if you're like, why are they on today? We normally do this on Tuesday.
Yeah,
It's now Monday. You're traveling tomorrow, so we did it
yeah,
early. But I think we'll be back next Tuesday at 10.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
if, apologize if we missed anybody who normally tunes in, but
We'll post it.
here we
It'll
are.
be there. It'll be there,
It'll be
right?
there.
All
Awesome.
right.
Thanks
Talk to you
everyone
next
for
Tuesday.
watching. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Safe travels.
Thank you.